this is the punchline right here. Seek simplicity to preserve complexity. And this is sort of the macro idea that I'd like to explain over the time that I have with you. And I say Bob Henderson, not really, because it dawned on me one day that I wanted to use this quote, and I didn't know who had said it. So I went back into my notes over years and struggled, and then realized, suffering from the great academic imposter syndrome, that I said it. And that just won't do. I can't do that sort of thing. So I'll say that I'm on the shoulders of great users of the words simplicity and complexity. So Henry David Thoreau said, simplicity, 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 in his efforts to understand his time on Walden Pond. He said more things than that, but those were important words for him. And similarly, Alfred North Whitehead said, seek simplicity, but mistrust it. So it's an important word in outdoor education and in our connectedness to the natural world, I think. The other important word here is complexity, and I know that comes directly to me from the Norwegian philosopher Sigmund Crowley Settering, who said, the worst thing you can do to a person is take away their inner complexity. And those words demand some explanation. So I come to you today as an outdoor educator who for about 29 years has been sharing that quote and trying to explain it to students. And well, I'm grateful for the courage of imperfection idea that's running through the conference. And I'll try my best to explain that for you today. And to do that, I'm going to take you to Willow Grove. It'll be not the full-on visualization that requires you to come with me and let your mind go somewhere, because for sake of time, we'll just do that sort of the intellectual one. So normally, I might say close your eyes, and over 20 minutes, I'll try to take you to Willow Grove. But here we'll just do it quickly, and I would say, imagine this scenario tomorrow you all decide to go to Willow Grove, maybe with a fishing pole, and you lie in the beautiful warm grass, and you feel the sun shining in your face, and there's birds singing, and the trees are trembling aspen, and everything just feels great, and you throw your fishing line in the water, and it's just sort of time on the line, and you might even have a little nap, and you just feel great. You don't stop to contemplate what Livingston would call being part of the greater enterprise, that sort of spiritual feeling of feeling connected to the natural world. You just take it for granted, you take it in stride, but you feel great. And you might even have that nap. And then somebody storms in and goes, hey, what are you doing? And you go, well, I'm startled. I just was, I was fishing actually, but I just came in. Well, you must have come in through another route because I've got a padlock over here on this other side. Oh, I must have. I stumbled into this beautiful spot. Well, you're doing no harm. So, well, what do you think of my experiment? Oh, I'm still a little confused. Take a closer look, guy. And you look down and you realize that beautiful warm grass that you were lying in that felt good, you really consciously noticed it, is artificial turf. And that sun lamp, the sun is a sun lamp. And he pulls a remote control and brings down one of the birds, and you realize there's a little needle in that bird going chirp, chirp, chirp. Everything is of human construction. And he goes, that's my experiment. It's a human fabricated world replicating the natural world. We've got lots of those. And says, well, listen, you're doing no harm, so carry on, just go the way you came. Nice guy. So you lie back down on that warm artificial turf, and you feel the glow of that hot lamp. And you hear the artificial birds, the plastic trees, and you throw that fishing line back in, and you lie back. Oh, yeah. And then you go, whoa, and you bolt upright, because you just had an epiphany. It's not the same. Now, if you're thinking it is the same, this would be probably a good time to go for a cup of coffee. So I'm hoping you're with me, because it's not the same. And that's where complication and complexity comes in. Because in Crowley Settering's idea, the human fabricated world is the complicated world. Heck, with time, I could figure out polymers, I guess, and I could make that artificial turf, and I could, with some effort, create all of that artificial environment. But in the non-human environment, that natural world environment, it's another kind of qualitative level. All of a sudden, it's complexity reigning supreme. And words like belonging, relationship, love, start to come into an understanding. And we do feel part of a greater enterprise that's mysterious and giving and good and a challenge for us. And that's complexity. And there's lots of people that have worked with this idea. Eric Fromm talked first about biophilia, picked up by E.A. Wilson. Theodore Roszak talked about ecopsychology. Fred Bodsworth, a literary figure, talked about our genetic nostalgia. He wondered why we have houseplants, cats, dogs, fireplaces. All those things just make our house dirty. But there's some genetic nostalgia, inheritance that connects us, a latent religious impulse to the earth, if you will. And even Jack Kerouac piped in with talking about the forgotten song across the water, putting it into a literary context. So all this is that micro stuff that we tend not to go to too often. And in outdoor education, it's useful because it helps us realize that we're not instilling an environmental consciousness as we work in outdoor programs. We're not trying to instill it, we're trying to distill it. We're drawing out something that's already there. And that's very rewarding for us. It's compelling. And that's kind of the macro idea. We're going to go from macro to work towards micro, if you will. So I'd like to get to some of the micro ideas, and they are the subtle and profound notions of story, place, and technology in outdoor education, in our connectedness to the natural world. I think that the things I'm talking about today are ancient ideas. I won't try to say this word, but from the Northern Territories of Australia, digging up the deeper roots for and of deep knowledge and deep learning, that notion of an ancient embedded knowledge. The Cree have a word for it as well. I'll try it. Myopematissimum, sorry. And as best I understand it, that word means being alive well. It implies life on the land, and the three critical concepts in the word are land, health, and identity. And it strikes me as a culture that's using a word like that is striving towards its health. And I'll tell you a story about the notion of tradition. Every year I would take my students out on one of many field trips, and we would go behind McMaster University where I was teaching and into Coots Paradise, and we would have a campfire in the winter, a 2-hour slot. And I would encourage students to tell animal stories around the campfire. And then little solo time, and then class would be over, and I'd encourage them to continue to have a little walkabout, or if they have to get back to class, of course. But before we closed, I said, now how many of you are going to go back and tell your friends and maybe even call professors about this wacko university professor that took you out for a campfire for a 2-hour slot? And most of them would put up their hand and wonder, they're going to talk about this in one form or another, and I didn't anticipate it being flattering, really. But because, for one thing, it's illegal to have a campfire in Coots, but, which is a strange thought, really, because what could be more natural than having a campfire? Anyway, so what I would tell them was, listen, I just got to say to you guys that sitting around a campfire telling campfire stories has been with humanity for literally thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Sitting in rows and being told what you're supposed to know by somebody else has really been with us a very short amount of time. So when you do talk disparaging about this or comment on it, and maybe it's a great experience for you, but you'll still probably cast it in some sort of light that's comical. When you do, just don't say, make sure you acknowledge that it's traditional. It may be unconventional, but acknowledge that campfire was traditional. And because in outdoor education, we're often striving for simple qualities in traditional experiences. So let me tell you a little bit about outdoor education. James Neal out of Australia produced a systematic framework for understanding outdoor education. And he said, well, there's 7 things here, and you have to have these things at all time, but they're differentially preferred. So for example, you could be focused primarily on the individual. You're interested in personal growth, helping people understand generic skill development, like understanding limits and potentials, self-confidence, and you're working towards those things. You may be more focused on the environment, where you're interested in how the environment works and how we act on the natural world. In fact, maybe even how the natural world acts on us. Thirdly, you might be interested in the activities that you partake in, be they canoeing, woodlot survey, that sort of thing. My own father thought I did a degree in recess. I think he was primarily focused on the activity. But as you see here, there's many more. I know the colleagues at McMaster thought that I taught canoe tripping. Thought that I taught canoeing. And I hope at the end of the day you see that there's more to canoeing than teaching canoeing. It might look like I'm teaching canoeing, but I was almost never teaching canoeing. So obviously I'm saying that the activity wasn't primary for me. Programming might be your focus, and you're interested in the sequencing of these things into a design and program package, maybe through the years. You could be interested in the group, social bonding behavior, and groups forming and debriefing skills and that sort of thing with groups. Or you might be interested in the role of the instructor. And finally, the seventh one is that you're interested in culture and how this outdoor environment plays out with culture. And I think that's the one that I would say was primary for me. I was interested in disorienting people from time a little bit so that they could be more in the present. I was interested in helping people understand embodied knowing through the experience. I was interested in story, place, and technology. And these elements all interact to create an outdoor program. And my focus was always on the cultural aspect. So in 2005, when Richard Louv coined that wonderful phrase, nature deficit disorder, I thought, this was good. This is a cultural application to outdoor connectedness to nature and health. And this phrase might just catch, nature deficit disorder. It certainly plays into my hand a little bit. But also Schiller in the 1790s, the German aesthetic, talked about the goal of education is to make us self-determined and not determined. And I had always used that as the main impetus for outdoor education, to help people become self-determined and not determined. So I always approached it from a cultural perspective, I think. A little bit more about outdoor education. There's a tendency to think in terms of soft and hard skills. So you've got interpersonal skills and intrapersonal skills. So personal skills and group skills, those are considered soft skills. And then you've got risk management, technical stuff, that activity again, that person can teach skiing well, and those are hard skills. And in a lot of programming and hiring of staff, it ends there. But we can add to this. And when we add to it, we bring our programs closer to nature connectedness. So there are warm skills. That's being attentive to how we dwell. Do we have good manners in nature? How we meet place and culture. And then there are green skills, the ability to interpret the place, both in terms of nature and heritage interpretation. You need all four of those in programming. And when you get all four of those, where I found that to resonate the best in cultures that I've experienced in outdoor ed, it's been in the Scandinavian culture. And I was quite taken, starting around the year mid-90s, I guess, with this notion of the word Friluftsliv, which means literally free air life. But in Scandinavia, the word has connotations below. It means that there's an inherent wisdom in the open air. It means that it's an understanding that it's traditional practices, but in a modern world, they almost look counterculture based, like my campfire in a class. It's traditional, but it really was counterculture to the culture of the university. And mostly, I think that it's understood that there's a healing element, an unquestioned notion that health and nature are connected. You could look to books like The Nature Principle and Eco-Mind that would give you countless studies about be it gardening or hospitals that have windows compared to rooms that don't, and et cetera, et cetera. I'll just draw on one that I quite like as an outdoor educator, and it's out of Santa Fe. And it's work that's been done with runaway diabetes, whereby doctors are prescribing trail guides. And they call this practice prescription trails. Makes sense to me. I've been doing it for decades. So that would be a bit of a stretch, typically. But in Scandinavia, it probably wouldn't make a book, because so much of my understanding of that culture is That's understood. Doesn't say everybody's practicing it, but it is understood in Friluftsliv that there's an inherent wisdom in the natural world. So Friluftsliv is about simple traditions, but those simple traditions carry complex relationships, and mainly being connectedness to nature. And similarly in Friluftsliv, an outdoor education that I'm sort of keen to try to promote in a North American context, nature is always first. There's a worry out of Scandinavia that the international leisure growth complex, to use their language, is infiltrating their culture such that the activity will become more important than nature, and so there's a commodification of experience and a commercialization. So the gear becomes more important, and sport and competition becomes more important than nature first. And following that, first there must be joy. Our primary modus operandi is for joy. Joy, good place to go into story, place, and technology. Story, Douglas Copeland in Generation X said, the world has become too big, way beyond my ability to tell stories about it. He also said on the next page of the book, either our lives become stories or there's no way to get through them. So from 3 decades of taking people out on day trips to 30 to 40-day canoe trips, I've come to the conclusion that story is paramount in outdoor education. And one is the ability to help people generate stories and to learn about the stories of a place and about themselves. Well, you know what? I should go back because that story, the story embedded in that slide is students who had, ice cream. And they kept it from me for 5 days. And they pulled it out on the last day and surprised me with ice cream before we put down the tent to go home. That's a story they have for their lifetime. Simple little thing, really. It's like scrambling eggs in the rain, but it generates stories that influence how they see themselves in their world. Outdoor education and that connectedness to nature piece is also about taking undifferentiated space and making it place, making it meaningful place. I'm thinking of a student, Gus, who said to me one day, my gosh, I get it. All the blue and green on these maps of Canada, it all looks like this. And I went, yes, it does, Gus. And he went, that's incredible. Now, from above, that might have looked like I was teaching canoeing. Place. Imagination, we have it because we don't have enough without it. We need to know more deeply about the places we live in, and outdoor education helps with that. Oops, hit the wrong button. So we get to these warm and green experiences, story making and story learning, place making and place learning. Technology has become the knack of organizing nature so we don't have to experience it. Technology is a way of doing things. It's not just the cell phone and a PowerPoint presentation, it's also a pair of snowshoes and a reflector oven around a campfire. And we tend to have forgotten that. So by way of wrapping up, in the outdoor experiences, in terms of creating simple experiences that connect people to nature, the campfire is very different than central air in the home. The central air in the home is disburdening technology, but it's not very engaging. The campfire technology is engaging, and it's really burdensome. And people seem to thrive on connecting means and ends, which doesn't happen a lot in our lives. And this technology does that. So in terms of the outdoor experience, what I've found to be critical is this ability to be involved in making technology and learning technology. So the antidote to our modern ways of dealing with the world is not technological, not scientific, not even ethical. The modern challenges are more in the metaphysical characteristics and ontological ways of being and understanding ourselves as spiritual beings on the earth. Thanks for the opportunity, and remember, seek simplicity to preserve complexity.